They called her cursed. A rejected Omega, left to freeze in the Blackwood. Yet every lost pup in the kingdom instinctively crawled to her crumbling stone hearth. She didn't steal them. They chose her, and when the Alpha King finally tracked the missing children, he uncovered a secret that would shatter his reign. The winter of 1,142 inches, the Frostmarch territory was unforgiving. It was a season of shattered timber and buried roads, where the snow piled high enough to swallow horse and rider whole. For Maeve, it was supposed to be her grave. 6 months prior, Maeve had stood in the grand courtyard of House Sterling, trembling in a thin linen shift. She was an Omega, a designation that usually guaranteed a quiet, protected life within the pack. But her wolf was profoundly silent, lacking the subservient but playful energy expected of her rank. Caleb, the high-ranking beater she had been promised to since childhood, saw only a political liability. Desperate to secure a marriage with Lady Catherine of the wealthy Harrington estate, Caleb orchestrated a brutal public rejection. He claimed Maeve carried the wasting sickness, a vicious lie that terrified the pack elders. Stripped of her pack scent, her rights, and her dignity, she was banished to the Blackwood, a vast expanse of jagged pines and freezing winds that bordered the River Trent. It was a cowardly execution. The cold was supposed to do what Caleb did not have the stomach to do himself. But Maeve did not die. Driven by an instinct older than the kingdom's laws, her silent wolf guided her to the ruins of Oakhaven, an abandoned stone keep from the old wars. It was a miserable shell of a fortress. Its roof half collapsed, but its grand hearth remained intact. Using skills she had learned from Thomas, the old village butcher who had taken pity on her in her youth, Maeve set snares. She foraged for frozen root vegetables. She survived. Then, the first miracle happened. It was a brittle January evening when she heard the whimpering. It sounded like the wind tearing through the stone, but Maeve's ears twitched. She waded through waist-deep snow to find a tiny, shivering mass huddled beneath a fallen oak. It was a pup, no more than 5 years old in human terms. It was little Oliver. He was an orphan from the lower wards of the capital, who had wandered away during a blizzard. By all laws of nature, Oliver should have frozen to death. Yet, he had walked 5 miles into the dead of the Blackwood, walking in a straight, determined line until his tiny legs gave out just yards from Maeve's keep. Maeve brought him in, wrapping him in the few ragged furs she possessed, pressing his icy skin against her own to share her body heat. As she held him, a strange, warm hum vibrated in her chest. For the first time in her life, her wolf stirred not with a snarl, but with a deep, resonant purr. Within hours, Oliver's fever broke. 2 weeks later, another arrived. Little Beatrice, a blind pup who had been abandoned by a rogue faction near the borders. Then came the twins, Silas and Finn, escaping an abusive foster household in the eastern provinces. Over the course of the winter, 12 pups, the lost, the broken, the discarded, found their way to Oakhaven. Maeve was terrified, yet fiercely protective. She realized with mounting awe that this was no coincidence. They were not wandering aimlessly. They were being pulled. Maeve possessed a secret that even she hadn't understood until now. She was not a defective Omega. She was a prime Omega, a genetic rarity unseen in 3 centuries. Her scent, untethered by a mate or an alpha's dominance, was a biological beacon. To a wolf with a severed pack bond, especially a vulnerable pup, a prime Omega's pheromones smelled like absolute safety. It was the mother's call, an irresistible, magnetic pull that drew the lost to her hearth and healed their shattered nervous systems upon contact. Inside the crumbling stone walls of Oakhaven, a new kind of pack was forming. Maeve worked herself to the bone, expanding her traps, drying meats, and patching the roof with pine boughs and mud. She taught the older pups to weave baskets and the younger ones to gather firewood. There was no hierarchy of strength here, no dominance or submission. There was only warmth, the smell of wood smoke and dried lavender, and the unyielding, fierce love of an Omega who had finally found her roar. But a secret so powerful could not stay hidden forever. In the capital city of Valerius, the sudden disappearance of 12 pups had not gone unnoticed, and the whispers of a dark force in the woods were beginning to reach the high throne. King Gideon of the Ironcrest pack did not sit comfortably on his throne. He was a man forged in wartime, an alpha of terrifying presence and uncompromising justice. His reign had brought unprecedented peace to the 5 territories, but it came at the cost of his own peace of mind. He was notoriously without a mate, his wolf rejecting every aristocratic female paraded before him, waiting for a scent he had begun to believe did not exist. The issue of the missing pups struck a volatile nerve within him. Pups were the lifeblood of the werewolf species, heavily protected by royal decree. When the reports reached his war room, the court erupted in panic. Lord Caleb, newly married and arrogant, was the loudest voice among the council. "It is dark magic, Your Grace," Caleb proclaimed, slamming his fist on the heavy oak table, "a witch of the woods, stealing our future for her twisted rituals. The villagers near the River Trent speak of a ghostly woman wandering the snow. Give me a detachment of your royal guard, and I will burn the Blackwood to the ground." Gideon stared at Caleb, his gold-flecked eyes narrowing. He did not trust the Beta's zeal. Caleb's rapid rise to power had always reeked of calculated opportunism. Furthermore, Gideon's wolf, a massive, battle-scarred beast within his psyche, was restless. The wind blowing in from the northern mountains carried a faint, almost imperceptible scent that made Gideon's heart thunder violently against his ribs. It wasn't the metallic tang of blood magic or the sour stench of a witch. It was something entirely different. "Stand down, Lord Caleb," Gideon rumbled, his voice low enough to rattle the chalices on the table. "I do not send armies to blindly burn my forests. I will track this thief myself." Accompanied only by his most trusted captain, Elias, Gideon set out at dawn. They shifted into their wolf forms, Gideon, a hulking brute of midnight black, Elias a lean, slate-grey hunter, and crossed the frozen River Trent. For 3 days, they tracked. The trail was confusing. There were no signs of struggle, no dragged bodies, no spilled blood. Instead, the small footprints of the pups marched with deliberate purpose deeper into the hostile wilderness. As they closed in on the ruins of Oakhaven, the blizzard intensified, howling through the pines. But beneath the scent of pine needles and sharp frost, Gideon finally caught the scent. It hit him with the force of a physical blow. He stumbled mid-stride, his massive paws skidding in the snow. It was a scent like crushed vanilla, wild honey, and the deep, rich earth after a summer rain. It was a scent that bypassed his logical mind and slammed directly into his soul. His wolf howled internally, clawing at his mind with a single, deafening demand. "Mine. Sanctuary. Mate," Elias whined, sensing his king's sudden distress, but Gideon shifted back to his human form, ignoring the biting cold. He threw his fur-lined cloak over his shoulders, his chest heaving as he approached the ruined stone archway of the keep. He expected to find a monster. Instead, he heard laughter. Gideon crept to the shattered window and peered inside. The great hearth was blazing, illuminating a scene that defied all logic. 12 pups, ranging from toddlers to adolescents, were scattered around the room. They were not caged or cowering. They were well-fed, their cheeks flushed with warmth, their coats brushing against each other in relaxed, happy proximity. In the center of the room sat a woman. She was dressed in patched leathers and an oversized, faded woolen cloak. She was stirring a cast-iron pot over the fire, her dark hair falling in messy waves over her shoulders. Little Oliver was asleep with his head resting securely in her lap, while Silas and Finn were engaged in a playful wrestling match at her feet. Gideon's breath caught. He recognized her. Not her face, but the faded scent of her old pack. She was from House Sterling. The realization struck him like lightning. This was the Omega Caleb had banished, the one he claimed was diseased and dangerous. As Gideon stepped over the threshold, his heavy boots crunching on the stone, the atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The pups stopped. In a flash of collective protective instinct, the 12 orphans formed a barrier between the Alpha King and Maeve. They bared their tiny fangs, growling fiercely at the most dangerous apex predator in the kingdom. Maeve stood up slowly, gently moving the pups behind her. She did not cower. Her eyes, the color of stormy seas, locked onto Gideon's. She recognized his royal crest, the iron wolf pinned to his cloak. She expected execution. She expected him to rip the children from her arms. "You have come to take them," Maeve said, her voice raspy from underuse, but steady as stone. "They are not stolen, King Gideon, but if you try to drag them back to the gutters that starved them, you will have to kill me first." Gideon stood frozen. His eyes traced the sharp curve of her jaw, the fierce, unyielding light in her eyes, and the undeniable, overwhelming aura of a prime Omega radiating from her skin. He looked at the faded woolen cloak she wore. He recognized the stitching. It belonged to Caleb. The truth unraveled in Gideon's mind, cold and sharp. Caleb hadn't just banished an innocent woman. He had thrown away the kingdom's greatest treasure to secure his own wealth, lying to his king in the process. Gideon didn't draw his sword. He didn't issue a command. Instead, the Alpha King of the Iron Crest Pack, the most feared warrior in the 5 territories, slowly dropped to one knee on the dirty stone floor, bowing his head in front of the rejected Omega and her army of lost pups. The silence in the crumbling keep was absolute, save for the crackling of the hearth. Maeve stared at the massive, battle-hardened man kneeling in the dirt. King Gideon, the sovereign of the 5 territories, a warlord whose name made rogue factions tremble, had lowered his head to a rejected, banished Omega. Behind him, Captain Elias stood in the ruined archway, his jaw visibly slack. He had served the king for 15 years and had never seen him yield to anyone, let alone an outcast in the dead of winter. I am not here to take them from you. Gideon's voice was a low, soothing rumble, deliberately softening the natural alpha command that usually laced his words. He slowly raised his eyes to meet hers, and for the first time, Maeve saw the gold flecks swirling in his irises, the universal sign of a wolf recognizing its destined mate. I am here to ensure you never have to freeze again. I am here to bring you all home. Maeve's heart hammered against her ribs. Her wolf, silent for so long, was practically singing in her blood, vibrating with an overwhelming sense of rightness. But the human part of her, the woman who had been dragged through the mud and discarded by Lord Caleb, remained fiercely skeptical. She pulled little Oliver closer to her side. My home was House Sterling, she said bitterly. They threw me to the wolves. They just didn't expect the wolves to side with me. If you take me back to Valerius, I am a rogue by law. I will be executed, and these pups will be thrown into the royal orphanages. The laws of men and councilmen mean nothing when they contradict the laws of our nature, Gideon replied, rising slowly so as not to spook the children. He unclasped his heavy, fur-lined royal cloak, a mantle made of bear pelt and lined with velvet, and stepped forward, draping it gently over Maeve's trembling shoulders. The sheer weight and warmth of it, imbued with his rich scent of pine, ozone, and old leather, made her knees weak. You are a prime Omega, Maeve, the first in centuries. You are not a rogue. You are the heart of this kingdom, stolen from us by a coward's lie. He looked at the ring of pups, who were still watching him with deep suspicion. Captain Elias. Gideon ordered without turning his head. Yes, Your Grace? Ride to the garrison at River Trent. Fetch the royal carriages. Bring Dr. Henry Arris and Lady Genevieve from the healing wards. We have 12 royal wards and a queen to transport. Maeve gasped, her hands flying to her mouth, but Gideon held her gaze. He did not touch her, respecting the boundaries she had built around herself in this frozen wasteland. You will have your own wing in the Obsidian Palace. No Alpha, not even me, will enter without your permission. You will have full authority over these children. But you cannot stay here. The blizzards of February are coming, and Oakhaven's walls will not survive another storm. It took 3 days to organize the caravan. When the heavily armored royal carriages finally arrived, outfitted with braziers and thick wool blankets, the pups were loaded inside under Maeve's careful supervision. The journey back to the capital city of Valerius was a slow, deliberate march. Gideon rode alongside Maeve's carriage the entire time, his massive black warhorse cutting through the snowdrifts, his eyes constantly scanning the tree line for threats. When they finally breached the towering iron gates of Valerius, the city was in an uproar. Word had spread that the king had found the missing pups. But the rumors of who he was bringing back with him had ignited a firestorm of gossip. Gideon did not take them to the rear entrances. He paraded the carriages straight up the central thoroughfare to the Obsidian Hall, the seat of the High Council. Maeve, stepping out of the carriage wearing the king's cloak, held little Beatrice in her arms while Silas and Finn clung to her skirts. The common folk whispered in awe, pointing at the strange, beautiful woman radiating an aura of such profound peace that the usually aggressive guard dogs in the courtyard began to whine and wag their tails as she passed. Inside the great hall, the council was waiting. The cavernous room, built from dark stone and illuminated by hundreds of floating candles, was packed with the lords and ladies of the 5 territories. At the center of the political elite stood Lord Caleb of House Sterling, holding the hand of his new, wealthy bride, Lady Catherine of the Harrington estate. As the massive oak doors swung open, Gideon entered first. his presence commanding immediate silence. But it was the woman who walked in behind him that caused the room to shatter into chaos. Caleb's face drained of all colour. His arrogant sneer vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated terror. He stumbled backward, knocking over a chalice of wine that shattered on the stone floor. He had signed her death warrant in his mind 6 months ago, yet here she was, not only alive, but draped in the king's own colours, glowing with a health and power he had never seen in her before. Lord William Harrington, a stern and traditional alpha, stepped forward. "Your Grace," he boomed, gesturing to the pups. "Praise the ancestors you have found the children, but why have you brought this vagrant into the sacred halls? She is the outcast of House Sterling. She is diseased." Gideon's eyes locked onto Caleb, his voice echoing like thunder in the cavernous hall. "She is no vagrant, and she carries no sickness. I suggest you ask your son-in-law, Lord Harrington, why he lied to this council, to his king, and to the gods." The great hall erupted into a cacophony of shouts and accusations. Caleb, driven by the desperation of a cornered animal, shoved his way to the front of the dais. He knew that if the truth of what he had done came to light, it wouldn't just be his reputation destroyed, it would be his life. "Treason!" Caleb screamed, pointing a trembling finger at Maeve. "She has bewitched you, your Grace. She survived the Blackwood through dark magic. She stole those pups to enact revenge against House Sterling. I banished her legally for the safety of my people." "Show me the documentation," Gideon demanded coldly, stepping down from the dais to tower over the beta. "Show me the writ of banishment, signed by the royal apothecaries, confirming the wasting sickness." Caleb swallowed hard, sweat beading on his forehead despite the drafty hall. The papers were lost in the winter transition, but Dr. Arthur Pendleton examined her himself. "He will testify." Maeve stepped forward. The timid, broken girl who had been cast out 6 months ago was gone. In her place stood a woman hardened by the wilderness and awakened to her true nature. She gently handed Beatrice to Elias and walked directly toward Caleb. The closer she got, the more the air in the room seemed to shift. The scent of crushed vanilla and wild honey bloomed, heavy and intoxicating. "Arthur Pendleton," Maeve said, her voice ringing clear and steady, was paid 300 gold pieces from the Harrington dowry to forge that diagnosis. "You needed me gone, Caleb, but you were too much of a coward to execute an innocent woman yourself, so you let the snow do your dirty work. But you made one mistake." Caleb sneered, trying to muster his dominance. He invoked the oldest, most archaic law in the kingdom. "You are still bound to my house by the Edict of 1098. If you did not die, you remain the property of House Sterling. I invoke the right of the first claim. She is my subject, King Gideon, and by the ancient laws you must hand her over to me for judgment." A collective gasp echoed through the hall. Caleb was gambling with his life, using an ancient loophole that technically, legally, still held weight. If the king refused, he would be breaking the very foundation of the pact treaties. Gideon's hand went to the hilt of his broadsword, his wolf snarling violently in his mind, ready to sever Caleb's head from his shoulders. But before the king could draw his steel, Maeve placed a gentle, steadying hand over Gideon's. "No," she whispered to him. "He wants to use the old laws. Let him. I will answer him with something older." Maeve turned her back on the king and faced Caleb and the gathered alphas of the council. She closed her eyes, reached deep into the well of power she had discovered in the ruined keep, and unleashed her wolf. She didn't shift into a beast. Instead, she released the full, unrestrained force of a Prime Omega's dominance. Unlike an alpha's dominance, which forces submission through fear, pain, and the crushing weight of authority, an Omega's dominance operates on the deepest, most primal biological level. It is the mother's command. It bypasses logic and strikes directly at the nervous system of every wolf in the room. A visible shockwave of pure, golden energy seemed to ripple from her skin. The scent of vanilla and honey became a physical weight in the room. Instantly, every guard, every lord, every alpha in the hall dropped to their knees, gasping for breath as their internal wolves whined in absolute reverence. Even Lord Harrington collapsed, his hands trembling against the stone. Caleb, standing closest to her, was hit the hardest. His legs buckled instantly. He crashed to his knees, tears streaming down his face as his own biology betrayed him. forcing him to submit to the highest matriarchal power their species possessed. "You speak of claims." Maeve's voice resonated with an otherworldly echo, commanding the silent room. "You speak of property. Look at me, Caleb." Caleb forced his head up, his eyes wide with horror and awe. He could not look away. He could not speak a lie. The Omega aura compelled absolute, brutal honesty. "Did I carry the sickness?" she demanded. "No," Caleb choked out, sobbing uncontrollably. "Did you bribe Arthur Pendleton to sign a false ledger?" "Yes." He wept, his face pressed to the stone. "Yes, to get Catherine's dowry. You were a weak, silent wolf. I thought you were useless." Lady Catherine, kneeling a few feet away, gasped in horror, realizing her entire marriage was built on a foundation of rot. Lord Harrington looked at his son-in-law with unmasked disgust. Maeve looked down at the pathetic man who had caused her so much suffering. She felt no rage, only pity. "I am not your property, Caleb. I belong to the earth, to the lost, and to myself." She allowed her aura to recede, drawing the overwhelming energy back into herself. The lords and ladies of the court gasped for air, slowly rising to their feet, staring at her with profound, terrified respect. Gideon stepped up beside her. He looked at the trembling Caleb and delivered his judgment. "Lord Caleb of House Sterling, you have confessed to treason, fraud, and the attempted murder of a Prime Omega. You are stripped of your titles, your lands, and your name. By nightfall, you will be escorted to the edge of the Blackwood. You will be given no coat, no supplies, and no weapons. Let us see if you fare as well in the snow as the woman you discarded." Guards immediately seized Caleb, dragging his screaming, weeping form from the obsidian hall. Lord Harrington did not utter a word of protest, already turning his back on the disgraced beater. When the heavy doors slammed shut, silence returned to the hall. Gideon turned to Maeve. The fierce, terrifying Alpha King reached out, gently taking her scarred, calloused hands in his. In front of the entire High Council, he dropped to one knee for the second time. "You asked me not to bring you to a place where you would be an outcast," Gideon said, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the room. "I pledge to you, Maeve, that you will never be cast out again. My crown is yours. My pack is yours. My heart has been yours since the moment the wind brought your scent to me in the snow. Be my queen. Be their mother." Maeve looked at the man before her. She looked at little Oliver, Beatrice, Silas, and Finn, who were peeking out from behind Captain Elias's legs, smiling at her. She realized then that the Blackwood had not been a punishment. It had been a crucible, burning away the weak, compliant girl she was supposed to be, to forge the queen the kingdom desperately needed. She smiled, a brilliant, radiant expression that lit up the dark stone of the obsidian hall. "Only if we build a school in the woods," she whispered, pulling him up by his hands. "For the pups," Gideon smiled back, wrapping his arms around her waist, finally burying his face in her neck to inhale the scent of his mate. "We will build 1,000 of them," he promised. Queen Maeve did not just survive the bitter winter, she conquered it. The Oakhaven ruins were rebuilt into an academy for orphaned pups, a testament to the Prime Omega who reshaped a kingdom. Beside her Alpha King, she ruled with a fierce, nurturing grace. The rejected outcast became the mother of a new era, proving that true power lies not in breaking the weak, but in fiercely protecting the lost.